Which is the larger festival, for about 5 years, and I've been involved in Litquake for about 3. And what I love about it is the kind of energy and excitement that you get about literature and about writing and about books. And I think it's this positive, entertaining, beautiful, wonderful thing. There's 80 events happening with 450 authors in the mission over the course of 3.5 hours. It's utter controlled chaos and insanity. So fascinating to see the literary culture of San Francisco kind of come together in this wonderfully supportive environment.
A logging truck rolls by and the headlights play across his red face. He looks scared to death.
I've been working on this since January of this year, so 10 months in the making, and it's finally here. We have Carol Queen reading for Good Vibrations.
Okay.
We have a bunch of readings by children's authors at Paxton Gates for Kids. We have poets everywhere. Poets in coffee shops. We have poets in art galleries. We have poets at bars. There's
welcome,
so much.
guys. This is the book pot.
Craziness. You can't even describe
and then we're
it.
gonna face
You
a
have to
which
experience
it has to
it.
do with
Dance all year to put these wonderful events together and bring in amazing authors for the sake of the art and for the city of San Francisco and for the Bay Area. So Clarion Alley is definitely one of the biggest lit crawl venues, only because we actually, first of all, we host all 3 phases, and because of the size of this alley, you know, we're able to bring in 100 to 200 people. Shout outs from me are going to go to all of the indie bookstores here in San Francisco. All of the volunteers that make Litquake happen every year.
Litquake is the world's largest literary festival in San Francisco. It's been going for 12 years, start 12th year, and it's 7 days of non-stop literary programming, and we bring in authors. It used to be just authors in San Francisco. Now we bring in authors from around the world. Some friends had been to the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh, and they told me they'd been to this great event in all these alleyways, and it gave me an idea. So I said, do you want to do it? We went for coffee, and the rest is history. We have readers who are part of this amazing photography project that Julie Michelle has done. It's called I Live Here SF, it's a blog. The second phase, a bunch of people have written stories of these different tours around the city. And then the third phase is horror magazine. We always like to have a little bit of a dirty, edgy, sexy component in the alley.
Please join me in welcoming Julie Michelle, who is a photographer and writer who started this portrait and storytelling series, which features San Francisco residents talking about what they love about our city and being photographed in some of their favorite places around town.
I Live Here SF is a photography and portraiture project that I began in March of 2009. It became an exploration of the city through the faces and stories of the people who participate. If you look around you on these walls here in the alley, you'll see many of the people I'm talking about. Anyone can participate in I Live Here SF as long as they are a San Francisco resident and are willing to write a story or a poem based on their life here. But my casual photographic pastime blossomed into so much more than I ever could have even envisioned. Within days of starting I Live Here SF, I lost my full-time job, becoming yet another casualty of the U.S. housing bubble. I went from being an executive assistant with a cushy office job to a frightened, middle-aged statistic who was cashing in bits of her 401k plan to supplement the unemployment checks. Up until then, San Francisco had been the most vibrant and exciting place to live that I had ever known. But once I lost my job, San Francisco became my lifeline and my friend. Many of the people I photographed at the beginning were, like me, recently unemployed and needing some respite, some basic distraction from the upheavals that made their lives so uncertain. Since then, I have walked countless miles in this city, 49 square miles many times over, with people I have met at bus stops, in coffee shops, and corner markets. I have worn out several pairs of shoes climbing hills, trespassing into vacant lots, and wandering on rooftops with people I didn't know just 10 minutes prior. To date, I have almost 200 stories from almost every neighborhood in the city to color my wanderings.
All right. Hi. I feel a little overdressed for here and underdressed for the opera, which is where I'm going to right after this. I had a lot of trouble writing this. Everything I wrote just felt like total bullshit about why I really moved here. So I threw everything away and wrote this morning. I'd never given much thought to San Francisco, at least not in terms of being a livable city. It sounded like a fun place to visit, but with its hills and intrigue and car chases, it just seemed like too exhausting a place to live. I'd seen What's Up, Doc. I knew what San Francisco was all about. I didn't exactly want to move here. Until I went to the Castro. I'd been living in Berkeley, something I dreamed of doing ever since I let my father bribe me into going to UCLA instead of Cal. He told me he didn't want any son of his going to a goddamn hippie school, so I moved to LA. I'd always trash-talked LA for being a city of fakes, of Porsches and plastic surgery. Berkeley, on the other hand, was a land of freedom and people power and sandals. It was a place I could feel comfortable being a recently out, Sondheim-loving, Gone with the Wind quoting homosexual, because everybody always accepted everybody else in Berkeley. And I was moving in with one of my closest friends who had just also come out as a gay man. He was renting a large Victorian house on Lorena Street with his sister and a few friends. All was going to be peace and love. It was going to be fantastic, except for one little thing. Somewhere between the time my friend came out and I moved in, he got a girlfriend who hated me because I was gay. Or more correctly, because I was close to her boyfriend, who was gay. The rest of my housemates were her friends. It didn't go well. I moved to the Castro to cut loose and have a good time just like the other guys, but I was still in mourning too, just like my new neighborhood. No wonder I felt so at home here. But there's more to it than that. I also came to San Francisco to get a new lease on life, which is precisely what I did. Unfortunately, the bar that made me fall in love with San Francisco in the first place received no such lease. It closed in the autumn of '95, the season I moved there. I mourned that loss too, but I moved on quickly. I came to San Francisco for change. That neighborhood had suffered worse losses, and so had I. But there was good change too. Late '95 may have seen the demise of the Elephant Walk, but it also saw the arrival of newly approved AIDS drugs, protease inhibitors, which gave many of my neighbors new extended leases on their own lives. Though none of us has the power or foresight to choose the place where we were born, if we're lucky, we can choose the place where we're reborn. And even though the sophisticated land of the Elephant Walk and pianos and Stephen Sondheim may no longer exist, it was there for one brief moment, the one brief moment I needed it to be the most, before it vanished like some super gay brigadoon. Of course, it may have only existed in my own head, but the memory of it sustained me through the darkest period of my life. The power of it drew me to what was become my favorite city in the world. I was lucky. I chose wisely. I got to be reborn in San Francisco, and not in Berkeley.
So I'm just going to launch right into it. Begins with a quote from Mark Twain. The quote is, "When in doubt, tell the truth." Saturday night, 3 a.m., the flesh trade is in high gear. I ring a doorbell in the massage parlor in the Tenderloin. An old fart, straight out of a vintage Playboy cartoon, stands between doorway and gate, basking in the warm send-off of two young Asian girls. Strands of disheveled hair stick out in all directions, and his pink face is flushed with the kind of excitement that bespeaks manly triumph. "We make massagey again," one of the girls giggled. In the cab, he smiled like the cat that ate the canary and said, I just fucked the shit out of both of them little gals. Judging by that send-off, you must have really put the wood to him. Brother, did I ever, he said, beaming with pride, matting down the remaining few wisps of white hair that feathered his skull. He was going to the Marriott at the airport, a good load. Trouble is, he said, for 15 years I couldn't get it up. Now I can't get the goddamn thing down. Huh? I said for 15, mother of God, this thing hurts. What exactly are we talking about? My penis pump. My penis pump is stuck. He told me that the blight of impotency, which had cast a black cloud over his life for the last 15 years, had suddenly lifted 2 days ago when he had a prosthetic penis put in. This shouldn't be happening. What I've got here is the very best pump made anywhere in the world. Top of the line. My doctor says it's the Cadillac of penis pumps. My doctor told me to consider it a medical emergency if I stayed hard for over 3 hours, and we're closing in on, he consulted his watch, 4 right now. Is there a hospital nearby? They have medicine for this condition, something to constrict the arteries. I'm thinking, shit, I'm going to lose this airport run. Less concerned with his penis than my fare, I tried to reason with him. The problem with the hospital is you're going to wait a long time. You know that, right? After that, they're going to charge you an arm and a leg for your penis. Shit, we got to do something. This bastard is killing me. Yeah, let's put some ice on that bad boy. I'm thinking, man, am I a cold son of a bitch or what? At a bodega at 7th and Mission, just before hopping on the freeway, I bought him a 7-pound bag of ice with a blue polar bear mugging on the package. He put it on his lap. How does that feel? Cold. Cold as a witch's tit. Good luck with the ice, I said, watching him waddle into the lobby of the airport Marriott with 7 pounds of slowly melting ice between his legs. How long, I wondered, would he keep the ice in that position? Would it affect his ability to get a room? And more to the point, come morning, what scandals would he inflict on the Spanish-speaking ladies of the housekeeping staff? It was only then, after he left the cab and these questions flashed through my mind, that I discovered a spot the size of a sumo wrestler's ass on the velour upholstery of my Dodge Intrepid. It poses a unique question. What do I do? Cover it with a towel? Assuming I had a towel to cover it with. And furthermore, what do I tell the next passenger when she sees a towel on the seat? Certainly not the truth. Nobody would ever believe that. Thank you.
The subtitle of tonight's event is How We Got Here and Why We Stayed. The way I got here involves the birds and the bees. I was born here. I cannot claim any responsibility. In fact, my parents were born here. My grandparents were born here. I'm from here. It just happened that way. For that very reason, I spent much of my life aggressively taking San Francisco for granted. And when choosing a college, I settled on a school in glamorous Philadelphia. Have you ever been to Philadelphia? It's like Reno, but without the charm. Philadelphia actually wasn't that bad, but by the time December rolled around, I was completely over my East Coast adventure. Dirty snow, Amish people, and 15 minutes to Delaware? Thank you, no. Getting home for Christmas required a late-night flight from Philly to St. Louis, and then the red-eye back to SFO. I get into SFO at 2 o'clock in the morning. After arriving uneventfully in St. Louis, we were delayed by a snowstorm. I found myself stuck in 24B, the bitch seat. On the aisle next to me was a grizzly-sized elderly man with extraordinary body odor. And on the window to my right was a teenage mother holding an infant in her lap. The baby was, of course, hysterical through much of the flight. I don't blame him. It was a horrible, horrible flight. The man sitting next to me had fallen asleep. You know how I could tell? He was screaming. He was a sleep screamer. I'm not talking snoring. This guy wasn't a very, very loud snorer. He was screaming, yelling, hollering as if being harmed. Ah! He was screaming. Teen mom on my right bounced this tiny child on her knee. He wouldn't stop crying, and nervously she dug around in her bag for something to shut this kid up. Her big solution? She started feeding her baby an apple. Because the baby, didn't have teeth, he immediately started choking on the apple. Oh my God, she screamed, my baby is choking. No one could hear her because the guy on the other side of me was, in case you'd forgotten, screaming in his sleep. My baby! She held him towards me. Save my baby! So naturally, I stuck my fingers in a strange child's throat and started digging around. I actually pulled a chunk of Granny Smith out of an infant on that flight. The gates of SFO were lit up and glowing. They were so warm. They were so welcoming. There in the terminal, among the people standing around, I could see the tiny silhouette of a middle-aged man with his nose pressed up against the glass like a little kid. He was watching our plane, his hands cupping his eyes so he could see outside. It was my dad. When I recognized him across the tarmac inside that airport, much like my seat partner, I let out a scream. There was nothing I would not do to get off that plane and run to my father. Evacuation slides, threats with a plastic knife. I was willing to suffer jail time just to get off that flight, just to get to the airport, just to get to San Francisco. Because for me, San Francisco isn't some city where I discovered myself. It's not a bridge, or a bay, or a boy. My view of San Francisco will always be looking past a teen mom, out a TWA window, into an airport to see that guy right there, because that's when I knew I was home. Thank you. Thanks, Dad.
I grew up in Bakersfield, which was about as spiritually as far from San Francisco as you could get. It was a bleak, cultureless place, and there was nothing for a young man of my sensibilities to do but sit in my room with my books and my records, writing derivative poetry while drinking cans of cheap beer stolen from my neighbor's ice cooler. My first real experience with San Francisco came about because of a girl. She was what, in the days of yore, we called a pen pal, the likes of which you could find in the backs of magazines, music magazines from the 80s, the ones that had names like Smash Hits and featured The Cure and Depeche Mode on the covers. I bonded with her over the Smiths and J.D. Salinger. She lived in a little beach town near San Diego, and she sent me volumes of Dostoevsky that she stole from me from her high school library. We exchanged bad poetry and mixtapes for years, before finally planning to meet at a Morrissey show in Berkeley. At the show, my pen pal ended up being far more interested in trying to touch Morrissey than the fact of my own physical presence. And I returned to Bakersfield a bit more bitter, perhaps, but with the city of San Francisco suddenly real and shining in my mind. My next step towards the city was moving to Santa Cruz. My girlfriend was offered a job, and I tagged along. I was there for 10 years. In that time, I broke up with my girlfriend, met and married my wife, and together we made our way eventually to the fabled city. After a short span of time at a spacious but roach-infested apartment in the outer Richmond, we ended up at our current place on the edge of the Tenderloin. Finally, we're in the heart of it all. We looked out upon Post Street from our living room window, gin and tonics in hand. We made up games like hipster or hooker. The possibilities for adventure and entertainment were endless.
You're certain you've been spotted by the other you, who's now walking from the other side of the alley with the kind of determination and confidence you lost way back on 16th and Valencia.
You may not recognize these messages composed of the city's thrum, but they were orchestrated ages ago by the paving of thoroughfares. They are brimming up in every moment's next, lettering every ancient marquee. These are ghosts you already know. They are the yous that have been with you all along, living out the other versions of your story. These ghosts are still here, still breathing the pauses of poets, still dreaming of impossible cities. Their light trails follow you.
Am I the only one? I asked myself this question for years. It was a quiet but constant whisper in my mind as I watched movies of passion and betrayal, as I listened to friends recount their exploits, as I lay beneath the sweating, thumping figure of a man I desperately hoped would like me. I thought I was weird because I'd never had an orgasm with a man or a woman. I tried both. Although I had had them on my own on numerous occasions. Grinding up against a Raggedy Ann doll in the lush green safety of the branches of a tree that hugged the ground, my child body thrashed about in lust and release. And then there were all those nights pressed hard against my pillow. It was almost an obsession, I did it so often. But afterwards, I always felt guilty, ashamed. Many a morning I vowed never to do it again. But what was strange was that I was not a child of repressed parents preaching sin and degradation. An abandoned copy of Hustler was not my first exposure to the male member. I had seen all kinds of penises. Black ones, gay ones, puny ones, those odd ones that point down instead of up, wrinkled ones. In fact, a veritable rainbow of genitalia.